Welcome to this webisode on community life. We've already looked into the spirit life of the monk in terms of his calling, his vocation from God, and his specific response to the call. We have already seen to the prayer life of the monk. And yesterday we looked into the discipline life of the monk. Today we are going to look into the community life of the monk. And this applies more specifically to those who are living in monasteries. And the first thing to mention about community life is the community rank. The date of entry, the virtue of the monks, and the decision of the abbot determine the rank of the monks in the community. Age is no determinant at all of the rank of monks. The younger monks must respect their seniors, and the seniors must love their juniors. Whenever they address one another, they must use the title brother. The abbot, however, because he holds the place of Christ, must be called father, not for any merit of his own, but out of respect and love for Christ. Ultimately, community rank points to the inner disposition of the monk's heart, respect and love for his father and brothers. So that's the bottom line of community ranks. Then let's talk about the material goods of the community. Private ownership is to be absolutely uprooted and removed. So private ownership is to be absolutely uprooted and removed, and no one may presume to give, receive, or retain anything as his own. Nothing at all. Not a book, a writing tablet, or ball pen. In short, not a single item, especially since monks may not even have at their disposal their own bodies and wills. That's chapter 54 of the rule. For their needs, they are to look to the father of the monastery and are not allowed anything which the abbot has not given or permitted. And distribution is to be made to each monk according as he has need. A cellarer, some kind of treasurer of the monastery, will take care of the goods of the monastery. and will give the necessary items requested by the brothers at the proper time. Will reasonably and humbly deny the improper requests and will provide the brothers their needed food and will show every care and concern for the sick, the children and the guests and the poor who go to the monastery. He should therefore be chosen from the community. So the cellarer should be a wise man, a wise monk, mature in conduct, temperate, God-fearing, father-like to the whole community. These should be his qualities. The attitude of monks towards the utensils and good of the monastery is this: to regard them as sacred vessels of the altar, and nothing is to be neglected. The upkeep of the monastery's goods, like tools, clothing, or anything else, should be entrusted to brothers whom the abbot appoints and whose manner of life he has confidence in. These goods should be kept clean and treated carefully. So you see how Benedict considers the goods of the monastery. They should be treated as sacred utensils at the altar. Third, in the item, in the consideration of the community life is food. In all matters, in food especially, frugality is the rule. Frugality is the rule. Every monk, except the sick, should abstain entirely from eating the meat or four-footed animals. Four-footed animals. And two kinds of cooked dish should suffice. Now, if there are fruits or vegetables which are available, a third dish may be added. Well, normally the times for the meals are 7, 12, 6 every day. So breakfast is taken at 7 in the morning, lunch at 12, and dinner at 6 in the afternoon. Now, if anyone is late through his negligence in arriving at the refectory, he should be reproved up to the second time. If he still does not amend, let him not be permitted to share the common table. And no one is allowed, no one is to presume to eat before the appointed time. And if a brother is sent on an errand and expect to return to the monastery that same day, he should not be allowed to eat outside, even if he receives a pressing invitation, unless he has the permission of his abbot. Now, this is important. Reading will always accompany the meals of the brothers. There should be complete silence during meals. No whispering, no speaking, no asking questions about the reading or about anything else. The abbot, however, may wish to say few words of instruction. Brothers will read not according to rank, but according to the ability to benefit or inspire the hearers. Kitchen service is part of the dynamics of community life. Kitchen service increases, rewards, and fosters love. And the brothers should serve one another. And after the mid-morning praise, brothers shall be assigned to prepare the community meal. And enough food should be cooked to include the food for supper and breakfast. Every week, 3 brothers take turns to serve the community. They will also take care of the orderliness of the kitchen and the dining room. The sick, the elderly, and the children are to be given special care. Care of the sick must rank above and before all else. And a separate room is to be designated for them. They may eat meat rather, and let them be served by a God-fearing, attentive, and concerned attendant. The old and the young should be treated with kindly consideration and not required to follow the strictures of the rule with regard to food. Now let's take a look at sleeping time of the monks. Well, normally sleeping time should be around 7 in the evening to, say, 3 in the morning. And 1 o'clock in the afternoon up to 2 o'clock in the afternoon for siesta time. And the monks are to sleep in separate beds. They receive bedding as provided by the abbot through the cellarer. All are to sleep in one place, or at least in groups of 10. All must sleep in such a way that all are always ready to arise without delay when the signal is given, and each will hasten to arrive at the Opus Dei, at the divine office or the liturgy of the hours, with all dignity and decorum. And the younger brothers should not have the beds next to each other, but separated among those of the seniors. And silence is to be kept in the dorms at all times. For bedding, the monks will use a mat, a pillow, a mosquito net, and a blanket. So that's the sleeping rule for the monks. Clothing and footwear. Each monk will have 2 habits for his use. 2 habits for his use. Also sandals to be used when he moves around with his habit, and boots for work. And these articles are to be made available in the locality at a reasonable cost in order to uproot completely the vice of private ownership. The abbot is to provide all things needed by the monk. Now let's take a look at the work of the monks. The rule for Benedict is idleness is the enemy of the soul. Idleness is the enemy of the soul. Therefore, the brothers should have specific periods for manual work, manual labor. When they live by the labor of their hands, as our fathers and apostles did, then they are really monks. Well, monks are not mendicants. They do not beg from people. The artisans of the monastery, if there are to practice their craft in all humility and only with the abbot's permission. Whenever products are sold, the products of these artisans are sold, those responsible for the sale must not dare to practice any kind of fraud. In fact, the products should be sold at a lower rate than that set by the seculars, by the market, so that the evil of avarice may be conquered and in all things God may be glorified. I know one monastery, they were producing kasoy wine, cashew wine, and it was making good at the market. When the Food and Drugs wanted to inspect their brewery, the monks refused. And I asked the brother who told me the story, why did the monks refuse to have your brewery inspected? And he said, may counting daya was a little fraud. And what was that fraud all about? I said, we were adding commercial wine to the cashew wine we were brewing. And of course, if the owner of the commercial wine, the manufacturer of the commercial wine will come to know about that, they're going to sue the monks in court. See? Even monks can resort to fraud. But as Benedict says, they must not dare to practice any kind of fraud, because even in the sale of their products, God has to be glorified, and in all things, God may be glorified. Then the brothers of the monastery who are sick or weak should be given a type of work or craft that will keep them busy without overwhelming them or driving them away. So that's work. My work in the monastery right now is I water the gardens of the monastery every day. This morning, I started to water the gardens at 5, and at 7:15 I was through. So I finished my work before the rising of the sun, because it's terribly hot right now in the desert. If the brothers are not at work, and if they are not at the Opus Dei, at the divine office chanting, then they should be doing Lectio Divina, reading. And the brothers should have specific periods for prayerful reading every day. Prayerful reading, the Lectio Divina every day. And the rule given by Benedict is each brother is to receive a book from the Abbot, from the library, and he is to read the whole book straight through. And these books are to be distributed at the beginning of Lent. Well, the reading through of the book is not just to finish it, but in order to assimilate and to make one's own the ideas and the sentiments expressed by the book. And on Sundays, where there is no work, no manual work, all are to be engaged in reading, except those who have been assigned with various duties. At least 2 hours are to be added to the required daily duty of 2 hours given to Lectio Divina on Sundays. So every day, at least the monk should spend 2 hours of prayerful reading. But on Sundays, he should spend more hours as there are no works at the field. The Bible, the Scripture, the fathers of the Church, the lives of the fathers and saints, Saint Basil, are preferred reading materials. So that's the prayerful reading or Lectio Divina. Let's go to the 8th point of the community life, and that is prayer. Let us remember, by the way, that, as we said, the prayer or the monk has dedicated his life exclusively for God and for prayer. And Benedict says the oratory or the chapel ought to be what it is called, and nothing else is to be done there or stored there. Well, in this chapel, for instance, at the back, there are still empty spaces at the back. I told one brother to clear up the back of the chapel because he has stored so many things there. And I had repeatedly told him that, and he did nothing about it. So one day, I myself cleared up the area, and I brought all the things that this brother has put in there. Because the chapel is not, the oratory is not a storeroom. And nothing should be kept in the oratory, in the chapel. in community, prayer should always be brief. And when the superior gives the signal, all should rise together. Well, it is the abbot's duty to announce the day, the hour for the divine office for the work of God, day and night. But he may do so personally or delegate the responsibility to a conscientious brother, so that everything may be done at the proper time. I remember my novice master in the Trappist Monastery in Guimaras told me a story while he lived in the Abbey of Our Lady of Gethsemane. So there was a young apprentice monk, and then several of them were assigned at the place where they were experimenting on cheese making. And the area where the cheese making experiments were held was quite far from the oratory and from the dormitory. And the main responsible for the cheese making experimentation was always late for the divine office. And so the abbot told him, next time you will be late, I will recommend you for expulsion, because nothing is to be preferred to the Opus Dei, to the work of God, to the divine office. And so when the warning bell was rung, these monks, these apprentice monks, they ran and they rushed to the dormitory and changed their working habits into the habit, so they would proceed to the chapel for the divine office. That was the hour of 6 or midday prayer. And this monk dumped everything into that container they were using for the cheese-making experimentation. And they were not supposed to go back to that area until after the mid-afternoon prayer. When they went back to the area where they were doing the experiment for the cheese making, then they found the cheese already coagulating. It's already coagulated. And when they tasted it, it was the best of tastes. And so he ran to the abbot and brought a portion of that coagulated cheese and to have the abbot taste it. And it was the best of cheese. And so this apprentice monk was asked to write down all the ingredients he put inside that experimental container, and that became the secret formula of the Trappist cheese. And this was the opportunity of the abbot of the community to tell the whole community, you see, the boon of obedience. Now the rule of Benedict says that if anyone comes to the oratory after the glory to the Father, glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, of the opening verses of the divine office, well, he is not to stand at this regular place in choir. He must take the place set apart by the abbot for latecomers. And then, should anyone make a mistake in psalm, responsory or refrain, or reading, he must make satisfaction. By the way, only those so authorized are to lead the psalms and refrains. And they should do this with all humility, all seriousness, and reverence. Now, the brothers who work so far from the monastery, well, for instance, the Trappist monasteries, the land area is quite big. Gethsemane in Kentucky, I was told by my novice master, has an area of over 200 acres. Can you imagine how big the land area is? The Trappist monastery in Guimaras has 200 hectares. So if the brothers work so far, they cannot return to the oratory at the time of prayer, and the abbot determines that this is the case. They are to perform the work of God, the divine office, where they are. So too, those have been sent on a journey. So nothing of the hours of the divine office should be neglected. For instance, if I go somewhere, either for official business or things like those, there is a copy of the liturgy hours at the service ride. And my class bag has a copy of the liturgy of the hours inside it, so that when the time for the praying of the divine office comes, wherever I am, I do the praying of the divine office, the hour. Because as Benedict says, nothing is to be preferred to the Opus Dei, to the divine office, to the liturgy of the hours, or the breviary. Now, for every community, the community of monks included, there must be leaders of the community. So, who are the leaders of the monastic community? The first, of course, is the abbot. The scriptural origin of the word abbot is Abba, A-B-B-A. He takes the place of Christ in the community. Abba means father. He gives life by transmitting doctrine. So his fatherhood is spiritual paternity, not biological paternity. He is a teacher. He instructs by deeds, examples, and words. And tending the flock entrusted to his care, he is a shepherd. And dealing with the sick by helping them amend their evil ways through correction and discipline, the abbot is considered a physician. Being trusted with the goods of the community, he is a steward, and he administers the spiritual and temporal affairs of the monastery. So that's the abbot is the first leader of the community. And after him is the prior, and he is to be appointed by the abbot. And his duties are designated by the abbot himself. Now, if the community is big, my novice master told me when he was in Gethsemane, Our Lady of Gethsemane in Kentucky, Illinois, that we were more than 250 monks. It was big, very big. Now, if the number of monks of the monastery is such that it requires small groupings, then deans are designated over a group of 10 monks each group. There was one time I was invited to give the retreat of the Daughters of St. Paul in Pasay, Harrison. It's a big community. And then the sisters, although they are not monastics, the sisters were divided into small groupings. And over the group, there was appointed a kind of a head of the group. One time I was also at St. Joseph's College in Quezon City. Oh, there are so many sisters there. The sisters, missionaries of the Immaculate Conception. They were also divided into small groups, with a sister being appointed as the head over that group. So if the monastery is big, then the brothers are to be grouped into smaller groups, and a dean is appointed. And they share the abbot's burden of administering the monastery, and they order the affairs of the monastery under the abbot. So now you have the abbot, the prior, the deans, then you have the cellarer. To the cellarer is entrusted the care of the aged, the children, the sick, and the guests. And Benedict says he must be a God-fearing man, humble, mature, kind in speech, peaceful, and sober. Then a porter of the monastery is to be designated. A sensible elderly monk is placed at the door of the monastery. And he should be one who knows how to take a message and deliver a reply. And his room should be near the entrance so that visitors will always find him there to receive them. So that's the porter. And then there are the seniors of the community. They counsel the abbot on matters that concern the monastery, and they watch over new members of the community. In the abbot's absence, the seniors act as or help as liaison officers in the disciplined life of the monks. So those are the leaders of the community. The abbot on top, then the prior, and if the community is big, the deans, and the cellarer. In some religious communities today, the cellarer is called the treasurer or the finance officer. Then you have the porter and the seniors. Now let's take a look at the external affairs of the monastery. Now, all guests are to be received as Christ. That's a basic rule of Benedict. All guests are to be received as Christ. And special attention is to be given to pilgrims and to those who share our faith. Now, before anything else, the guests are first led to the chapel. Before anything else, they're first led to the chapel, and then brought to the guest area. And no monk, except the guest master, is to speak and associate with guests unless he is told to do so. In no circumstances is a monk allowed to exchange letters, blessed tokens, or small gifts of any kind with his parents or anyone else, even with a fellow monk, unless the abbot says he may. So that's another rule. Because there will always be people who are kind enough to leave some tokens when they visit the monastery. I remember in the Trappist monastery in Guimaras, one time I was assigned to assist the guest master, an elderly American monk. And there were guests who came to the monastery, and before they left, one of them left a cute digital watch. Well, those were the times when the watches were digitalized. And Father Victor showed me the cute watch and said, "Oh, Father Santos, isn't it cute?" "Oh, yes, it is cute indeed, Father," I said. "You know, I would want to keep it for my use." But then the rule says, I have to present it to the superior of the community. And if the superior will not give it to me for my use, then I should be happy and contented, as a rule. Because no one is to presume to own anything. So, the role of the monastery concerning external affairs. Now, the journeying, when a monk goes out of the monastery, either for official transactions of the monastery or whatever may be the reason for his being sent outside, so brothers sent on journey will ask the abbot's blessings. So before they leave the monastery, they will ask for the abbot's blessings. And all absent brothers should be remembered at the intercessions of the Liturgy of the Hours. And when they come back from a journey, they should go to the chapel to report to the Lord what had transpired during the journey. So before reporting to his abbot, he should go to the chapel and report to the Lord, the Blessed Sacrament, what had transpired during the journey. Now comes the great proviso. No one should presume to relate to anyone what he saw or heard outside the monastery. And should he do so, he shall be subjected to punishment. And without the abbot's permission, no monk can leave the enclosure of the monastery for any reason whatsoever. That's journeying. Now let's take a look at the assignments of the monks, work assignments. The rule is each monk is to be given a work assignment that he should do in the spirit of loving service. However, if a monk is assigned a work that is burdensome or that he cannot do, he can choose the appropriate moment to explain patiently to his superior the reasons why he finds it difficult or quite impossible to do the work. Now, should the superior persist to hold to his original order, the monk should obey in love, trusting in God's help and convincing himself that this is the best for him. Because normally there's the tendency to grumble inside and to murmur inside. Now this last part of the community life is about fraternal relationships. Well, especially for the Cenobitic monks, this is one of community life's emphasis. And respect for persons is the center of fraternal relationship of community life. Monks are disciples under a master, and they come to the school to be trained. Remember what Benedict said about the monastery? It's a school for the Lord's service. But they're also brothers to one another, bound by ties of mutual charity, care, concern, support, and loyalty. I have listed down 13 practical pointers for fraternal relationships in the monastery, and they are lifted from the rule of Saint Benedict. The first, number 1, the abbot is not to disturb the flock entrusted to him, nor make any unjust arrangements, as though he had the power to do whatever he wished. He must constantly reflect that he will have to give an account to God of all his decisions and actions. So the abbot, therefore, being at the top of the leadership of the community, he has to do that. Number 2, the younger monks must respect their seniors, and the seniors must love their juniors. When they address one another, no one should be allowed to do so simply by the name, but they are to use the word brother. Well, human nature is human nature. Those who enter the head of others, they seem to lord it over the younger ones. Three, all absent brothers should always be remembered at the intercessions of the Liturgy of the Hours. 4. A brother assigned a burdensome task or something he cannot do, he is to accept the order given him with complete gentleness and obedience. Otherwise, he can make representations at the appropriate time. 5. In no circumstance should a monk presume to defend another in the monastery or to be his champion, for this can be a most serious source and occasion of contention. Oh, in the monastery there are also groups, and there can also be factions, and the natural tendency is for the members of the groups to defend one another. Then that's dangerous. Can be a most serious source and occasion of contention. 6. In the monastery, no one has the authority to strike any of his brothers. 7. Boys up to the age of 15 should, however, be carefully controlled and supervised by everyone, provided that this too is done with moderation and common sense. Well, remember, in the beginning, the Benedictine monastery were accepting boys, and these are the children of the well-to-do, and they offered them as oblates of the monastery. 8. If a brother, with the abbot's command, assumes any power over those older or even in regard to boys, flares up and treats them unreasonably, is to be subjected to the discipline of the rule. So the principle of no flaring up. 10. Obedience is a blessing to be shown by all. Obedience not only to the abbot, but also to one another as brothers. Since it is by way of obedience that the community goes to God. No unofficial order, however, may so precede the orders of the abbot or of the prior. Ten. If a monk is reproved in any way by his abbot or by one of the seniors, even for one very small matter, or if he gets the impression that one of his seniors is angry or disturbed with him, however slightly, he must then and there, without delay, request to open this perception to him and ask for a blessing to calm it. That's very basic in the community of Benedict. 11. Every monk should try to be the first one to show respect for the others by supporting with the greatest patience one another's weakness or of body or behavior, and by earnestly competing in obedience to one another. Well, I remember what my novice master told me in one of my sessions with him. But he said, I entered the head of Father Thomas Merton. The monastic name of Father Thomas Merton is Father Louis. And so the choir was arranged in such a way that they face one another. Imagine 200, over 250 monks. So they chant the divine office. And since I entered the head of Father Louis, Father Louis was at my back at the arrangement of the choir. And Father Louis, he told me, despite the artist that he was singing flats and sharps during the divine office. And so I was disturbed, distracted by the flats and sharps of Father Louis, of Thomas Merton. So I went to the Abbot and asked to be transferred to the other side of the choir. And I told him the reason why, because I'm distracted by the flats and sharps of Father Louis. I could not bear the flats and sharps. And the Abbot told me, he said, well, before I do transfer you to the other side of the choir, go back and spend some time. And then afterwards, you come back to me. And you try to take a look into 3 of your major defects. 3 of your major defects. And after that, you come back and we will talk about it again. So my novice master told me, I went back after about a week or so. And I told my Abbot the 3 major defects of my personality that I found out. And then the Abbot told me, okay, that's your weakness. 3 major weaknesses of yours. Now, multiply that by 250, and you have the sum total of the community's major weaknesses. And after that, the Abbot asked him, would you still want to be transferred to the other side of the choir? And he told him, no more, Reverend Father. I'll bear with the greatest patience with the flats and sharps of Father Louis. Beautiful, isn't it? But it's easier said than done. "12. No one is to pursue what he judges better for himself, but instead what he judges better for someone else." "13. To their fellow monks, they should show the pure love of brothers. To their Abbot, unfeigned and humble love and loyalty. To God, loving fear and preferential love." Now, what's the big deal of these 13 rules governing fraternal relationships in community? Well, Saint Benedict is more concerned why things are done and how they are done. Motivation behind observance is the object of his interest. And what is that motivation behind any monastic observances. Individual submission to the action of grace within the monk. In other words, to prepare the monk to receive with docility the action of the Holy Spirit in his life. That is the main concern of Benedict. So whatever the observances are in the community life of the monk, and I gave you 13 elements of the observances of the community life, ranging from community ranked, material goods, food, sleeping, clothing and footwear, work, and then reading, prayer, the leaders of the community, external affairs of the community, journeying, assignments, fraternal relationships. Benedict's concern is the motivation behind these observances is the object of his concern, namely, individual submission to the action of grace within himself, within the monk. Now, whatever is your context, your community, maybe your family, or maybe you belong to a kind of a community elsewhere outside your family, whatever. And whatever are the observances that are anent to your community life, the most important is the motivation behind the observances, behind what you are doing is individual submission to the action of grace within you. And that is the most important. Then you become docile to the action of the Holy Spirit, to the action of the grace. And then you begin to grow in age and wisdom before God and men. Time is up now. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow at the same time for another webisode. Bye now.